You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Paul Brophy. We're back here in St. Mary's here in Callan. I'm joined by Councillor Joe Lyons and Joe Kennedy, who is Chairman of the Callan Heritage Society. Joe, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup. Joe, this is an absolutely fabulous church. It's under restoration at the moment. Must be something that you're really pleased with, and I'd say the hope is that you're going to have something really special in a few years to come.
That would be the hope. It's a very, what would I call it, ancient church. It's the original parish church of Callan, built originally in 1250.
Wow.
So it's a long time here, and restored in the roughly 1450. And the architecture and everything in it is quite interesting, because the story goes that in the 1450 restoration, a lot of money was needed, like is always needed for these kind of places. And the parish church, a parish priest of the time, didn't have the funds. But a very wealthy family here called the Comerfords, which consisted of 3 maiden sisters, it said, they decided to put up the money, but they couldn't agree on the type of architecture to use. So the parish priest gave them all a section each, with the result that the architecture, especially in the main bulk of the churches, are a bit unusual.
Okay.
That the pillars on one side are different to the pillars on the other. The arches are different. The windows are different, not alone in size but in positions. So it's they all got their way.
So
anyway.
each section represents a different sister in the family. That's really, really interesting.
It is very interesting in itself. And then it continued on as the parish church of Callan here until Cromwell came here in 1650. And Callan people, unlike most places in the country, wouldn't surrender. They put up a resistance to Cromwell, and it took them 3 days to capture it, with the result that the parish church was badly damaged. The roof was set on fire, and it went into a ruin after that. And there's a section of it here, the chancel section, that was rebuilt or restored in about 200 years ago in the 1820s as a first fruits church with the Church of Ireland. And it continued on as the Church of Ireland here until about 1960. And the Church of Ireland parishes were amalgamated, and Callan Church was closed down, and the whole edifice here went back into the care of the Office of Public Works, and it's still in the Office of Public Works care.
Yeah, and your level of knowledge and is absolutely phenomenal. How would you have learned all this down through the years? Would this been just talking to people in the locality, or is there many books written on this church?
There's quite a bit written on it. Thomas Shelley, especially, he was a draper here in Callan in the 19th century. He wrote quite a bit on it and recorded the tombstones in it. And he'd be the main one. And also, there's been different articles about it down the years in different magazines and the old Kilkenny Review and things like that. So but there's no book as such about it in its own right, so to speak, which it probably deserves.
Absolutely, and someone who might be able to help make that happen, Councillor Joe Lyons. Joe, this is a fabulous historical building right in the middle of Callan, and there's great work going on here behind us. Definitely a book on St. Mary's Church. It's definitely something that could be looked at.
Absolutely, it's a gem of a centre here in the town. As regards books, Callan Heritage have produced so many books over the years, and I commend the Heritage Society because they are so important here in the town, recording all the past histories, and they have put a lot of books out, printed a lot of books, and every one of them was a bestseller, every one of them. And some of them are small little pamphlets, more of them are booklets, and more of them are quite large. But probably his biggest claim to fame is the Callan 800 book. There was an awful lot of work went into that, and that was printed and produced at the time Callan was celebrating its 800 years. But the Heritage Commission themselves, like, they are invalued here in Callan. And Joe, being the chairman, I don't know, he's the longest serving member, but he has put in, I think, over 40 years as secretary.
I was. I had to be nearly shot.
But it's fantastic. And like the heritage around Callan is great. And even where Joe is living, he lives in he owns a thatched house. And there's 5 thatched houses in the parish.
Is that what
And there's one in Emmett Rises. And they're all so well looked after.
Yeah.
But the thatched house Joe is in is a credit to him. It's fantastic.
And it's brilliant as well that you've been able to create a kind of a Callan heritage trail to your work in the heritage
that's right.
society. So you've been able to get all the historical points here in Callan and create something, really special.
That's true. Yeah, that was a great asset to the town, because anybody can do a tour of the town literally themselves by following the plaques and the information on them. So I thank the county council. They were very much involved in that for doing it, and they did a very good job on it. Thank Joe there especially.
And the church itself, it's still active in the sense that there are plots there and people have been buried there. So it is nice to see the building and the ground still being used in an active way.
That's right. I think the ancient merchants of Callan, the Middle Age merchants, they had a right of burial in here, and their descendants then had them as well. And it goes right down from the Middle Ages down to the present time. But I don't know if anybody else will be allowed to be buried inside here anymore now. I think they've stopped that. But the odd one gets buried in the graveyard outside as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Roisin and I, we were chatting off air. The level of craftsmanship in here is absolutely phenomenal. To think the work they were able to do 200-300 years ago, were not the same, means that we'd have now, but it's absolutely phenomenal, the workmanship. And it'd be brilliant to see that stained glass window restored if possible.
And the sheer amount of stone that's in here is almost mind-boggling, for a small town. It's a huge church for a small town. But then again, the reason is that Callan was the richest parish in the Diocese of Ossory at one stage, and that's why it's so big, way bigger than you'd normally expect for a small town of only 1,500 people in this time. It was a massive building.
Are there any other famous people that came from the town of Callan?
Oh gosh, this has a huge amount of very famous people. Edmund Rice, that founded the Christian Brothers. And then you had John Locke. He was a Fenian and a poet. And he wrote the Emigrant's Return. You had the Candler family, one of whom their descendants founded a Coca-Cola company.
Okay.
And you had the Cudahy family who founded the Cudahy meatpacking dynasty in the US. And we have a good few more as well. We
Architects?
The White House.
That's right. James Hoban just out the road out there as well. And Tony O'Malley then as a famous artist. And
so the architect who designed the White House and Leinster House came from Callan.
He did.
So it's a Callan man, for any Americans watching this, it's a Callan man that designed the White House.
Oh, it was, and not alone that, but he built it. He was a builder as well, and he built it twice, because after it was built, there was a war in 1812 between the United States and Britain. And during the course of the war, the White House was burned down, and Hoban came back and rebuilt it.
So it was a Callan man that designed and built the most powerful building in the world.
That's right. That's right, James Hoban. And there's 2 monuments to him, one out where he was born, another one just up the street in Green Street, the principal street in the town there.
Okay.
And Coca-Cola. How many people are drinking Coca-Cola to this day in 2025 are drinking Coca-Cola?
They are. They are.
And it all comes down to a Callan man.
It was the Candler.
The Candler man. Yeah.
Were they Jewish between Candler and what was the other name?
Oh, that was Henry Flood.
Oh, Henry Flood, was
Henry
it?
Flood.
All right.
He was a very famous Irish politician.
Jewish, I should say.
He was a big wheel here in the area as well. And Callan had a corporation at that time, and it had the right to send 2 MPs to the Irish House of Commons.
Okay.
And Henry Flood and James Agar fell out over who should be representing Callan, and they had a duel.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
1770s or seven
Wow.
around that time. And the result of the duel was Henry Flood shot Agar dead. But he got acquitted
That was the end of that.
because dueling was fairly well acceptable nearly at the time.
But when you're talking about famous people, Tom Cale, who was chief of police in San
right.
Francisco,
He was.
but his son is coming next week.
Oh, good.
And we looked up the grave down in Newtown. And going back to your books, we had a job to find the history and the grave and everything. But Jimmy Hine was there, and Jimmy had the Newtown book that was produced by Callan-County Society.
Right.
And it had every headstone, every grave, every inscription in the book. And thanks to the Heritage Society, all that's recorded.
It is.
And the very same in Coolya, Callan and Newtown.
Mm.
You've done them all, and that's a credit to you.
And the old
It's really
graveyard in Kilbride and the graveyard here as well.
Yeah, it's
It's
all
in
recorded. Very important.
Otherwise, they're impossible to read. A lot
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
tombstones.
But when you're talking about the building itself, there was the whispering arch out here on on the doorways. You can talk into one side and your voice comes out the other side.
Okay.
But all the young lads in the town, you'd often see them at it there.
Wow.
Yeah, something different in the building. How they discovered it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of there always.
That's absolutely amazing. Well, Joe, thanks a million for taking the time to chat about
Right,
Roisin
you're
and
welcome.
myself here on the Irish Political Roundup. And I said thank you to Roisin for doing camera and directing and doing a great job as always. And I'd like to say thank you to the listeners and the viewers for taking the time to watch us here on the Irish Political Roundup. And if you're in the Callan area, please do drop by. There's plenty of history to see.
And we must take this conversation further and come down and do another interview with more in-depth information.
Right.
Very good.
Very good. Thanks.